So good morning, everybody. Today's topic is the holiday of Purim and the book of Esther, the scroll of Esther called Megillas Esther, and a little piece also about the Torah portion because it all really ties in. And it's so interesting. Soon we're going to discuss about Queen Esther, Achashverosh, the king, and I so feel that our current situation is so much like the Purim story. You know, I always say like Trump is like an Achashverosh type. You know, I witnessed when the freed, I hate calling them hostages, those who were freed from the tyranny of the Hamas came to Trump, and they said to Trump one very important line: we feel God sent you to help us. And that really defines, I think, the whole story of the Megillah. So we'll start with the story of the Megillah. Are you both familiar with the story? Do we have to go through the story? Yes. Well, we'll do a little review of the story, but let's start off with a few leading insights into the Megillah. The whole concept of the Megillah, it's called Megillat Esther, the scroll of Esther. The holiday is called Purim, which is not a Hebrew name. Purim means, who knows what Purim means?
Lots,
a lottery, a goyrel. Why is Purim the only Jewish holiday that's called by a Persian name? It's a Jewish holiday. If God wanted to refer to the lots that Haman threw to choose a date to annihilate and exterminate the Jews, Chas v'shalom, he should have called it the Chag HaGoyralim, Chag HaGoyralois, the Goralot, the holiday of lots. Why use a Persian name to call a Jewish holiday? Since when are we so intelligentsia enlightened? Why is the scroll of Esther called the scroll of Esther? Why not the scroll of Esther and Mordechai? The scroll of Purim, right? Mm-hmm. Mordechai was also a hero in the story and helped write the scroll of Esther with the Chachamim, with the great sages. And another very insightful question is, read the Megillah, read the story, and not one will you see whose name is never mentioned in the Megillah.
Whose name? God?
God.
Yeah.
It doesn't say anywhere Adonai, Elokim, Hashem, any of the names of God. Now we know the Megillah is part of the Ketuvim, the Megillot that seals the written tradition. It's part of our handed down. How could God's name not be mentioned in one of the books that's part and parcel of the Jewish Torah and Ketuvim, the writings, the prophets, Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, right? Mm-hmm. Megillas Esther is the last book that seals the written tradition from Sinai. How could we not have God's name mentioned in this holy book? Doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. So these are questions that come across when you think of the holiday of Purim. And now Purim is very much tied into Moses. Why? Can anybody think of a relationship between Moses and Purim? When was Moses born and when did he die? It was the same day.
Oh.
Yeah. The seventh day of Adar. Mm-hmm. The seventh day of Adar. So Moses was born in this month and passed away in this month. And that's why Haman chose Adar. He said it's an unlucky month. Their leader, Moses, who gave them the Torah, was killed, died on this day. But he didn't know that Moshe was also born on this day. And that even a yard site of a Moshe is not an unlucky day. It's a very special day. It's a very energetic day.
Right.
So that's the connection of Moshe with this, with the holiday of Purim. And that's why Parshas Tetzaveh, it's very interesting, has the same question as the Megillah. If you read this Torah portion, Moshe, who is the central character in the whole book of Exodus, it's all about Moshe taking the Jews out of Egypt, giving them the Torah. He's the shepherd of faith, faithful shepherd or shepherd of faith. But yet in this Torah portion, his name is never mentioned. Moshe is excluded from this Torah portion, which is also The same thing, like in the Megillah, God's name is not mentioned. This Torah portion, Moshe is mentioned. And sometimes, it's not who's there, it's who's not there. Sometimes that makes a bigger statement than who was there, who didn't come. Why didn't they come? Why weren't they there? Why is his name not mentioned? Draws more attention than if his name was mentioned.
Hmm.
In the Megillah, God's name is not mentioned. You're like, God's name is not mentioned? So now brings us to a very, very insightful thing. The reason Moshe's name is not mentioned in the Torah portion is because you remember when the Jews, he came down with the first luchot after the giving of the Torah, he saw the Jews worshiping the golden calf. So
Right.
what does God say to Moshe? I'm going to wipe everyone out, and you'll bring the next generation of Jews who will be faithful to me, who will follow Torah mitzvahs, who won't worship idolatry. So what does Moshe say? He doesn't say, that's not a bad idea. Let's start from fresh. Let's start from scratch. He says, really? If you're going to kill the Jews, you have to take me too. And as a matter of fact, take me out of your Torah. I want nothing to do with the Torah if you obliterate my people, the Jewish nation. So when a tzaddik, especially a tzaddik of the caliber of Moshe, says something, it's not in vain. When a tzaddik says something, it always happens. So in this Torah portion, he said, take my name out of the Torah. God took his name out of this Torah portion. Even though God listened to Moshe and forgave the Jews, but that statement has spiritual repercussions. So his name is not mentioned in Tetzaveh. But notice that because Moshe's name is not mentioned, it draws attention to his greatness as a leader. Remember last week, one of the women asked me if we could talk about the leadership. So this is one point. She might listen to the recording, but whatever. But the point is, what's a true leader? A true leader is, I'm with the people. I'm one with my people. It's not me, I'm the leader, I'm sitting on the throne, and the people are separate. And I'm not responsible. If they decide to make a revolution against God, why is it my problem? I'm doing what I have to do. That's not a Jewish leader. A Jewish leader, a Rebbe, a Moshe is one with his people. It's not like you and me, them and I. I'm sitting in the pearly gates and they're separate. So this draws attention to the power of Moshe's leadership. He's not a separate entity. He's one of them. He's one of them. That's why also Moshe's name is also an Egyptian name. The holiday of Purim is a Persian name. Moshe is called Moshe because Memayim Mishisehu, Batya, the daughter, the princess of Egypt, takes him out of the water. And this is very significant. It's a very beautiful Kabbalistic insight that there are two worlds. There's the spiritual realm, the concealed world, and there's a revealed world where we live. We live in nature. We live in a revealed world. There's rain and there's snow and there's sunshine and babies are born naturally. We live in a very revealed world. We see trees and mountains. The dry land is called the revealed world because you walk and you see everything. Nothing is really concealed unless you're going an archaeological dig. What's the concealed world based on Kabbalah? The ocean. Because you see a beautiful ocean, but what lies beneath is the treasures of the ocean, the different sea life, the corals, the pearls, whatever you find in the depths of the ocean. So there are two worlds, the spiritual realm, the concealed world, we don't see everything, and which is considered like the ocean world, the water, because things are concealed. You don't see what's really beneath the surface unless you go deep sea diving or you go scuba diving or you're in a submarine or one of those vessels that doesn't implode underwater, unfortunately. So Moshe is called the water. He came out of the water. Moshe's soul came from that very, very lofty place of concealment. That's why he was able to bring heaven down to earth, because he came from the spiritual concealed realms, from the water, from that lofty place, as the Kabbalah. That's why he was able to bring down. That's why he was able to spend 40 days and 40 nights up in the spiritual realm studying and writing Torah. And then again, 40 days and 40 nights. His connection was with the divine, with the concealed world, the water world. Now, Aaron, his brother, was the opposite. Aaron was the Kohen, the priest. His job was, his soul came from what we call dry land, the revealed world. What was his job? To take from the world and bring it up to heaven. The offerings, the gifts, the incense, connecting the people on earth with the heavens. So they each had their roles. Moshe brought heaven down to earth, and Aaron brought earth up to heaven. They each had their roles. So Moshe came from the water, from the concealed world. So now let's bring it together. So why is this so important to know? It sounds beautiful. It sounds very nice, because each and every single Jewish person who stood at Sinai, man, woman, and child, for all generations, are connected to Moshe. That's why it's called Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe. God commanded, Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe. Moses commanded us and taught us the Torah. Each and every one of us has a part of Moshe within ourselves. By the very virtue that he was our leader, he took us out of Egypt. He brought us to Sinai, and we stood there with him and got the Torah from him. He was a conduit from God. So in that scenario, everyone has a piece of Moses within us. There's even a song from Eighth Day. We all got a little Moses in us, which means to tell us that we have that energy and that power to be like Moshe. So it's not like, oh, he was our leader. Wow, he was so great. He sacrificed for us. He was willing to give up his life for us. True. But by so connected to the people that we end up being part of him. Every one of us has a Moshe. That's why there's a Yiddish expression, Jeder Chassid hat a Stickel Rebbe. Every Chassid, every disciple has a piece of the Rebbe. When you're so connected to your leader, you have a part of them in you. It's a spiritual connection. So because we have a part of Moshe, we could be like Moshe. And I mentioned this story, but I'll mention it one more time. When Sir Jonathan Sacks, the chief rabbi of England, he became the chief rabbi. He was knighted by the Queen. He passed away. Brilliant, brilliant fellow. He was in academia in Cambridge. And he came to the Rebbe. People said to him, go meet the Rebbe. And the Rebbe asked him, what's happening in Cambridge? And he says, well, in this position I find myself. And the Rebbe says, no. No one finds themselves anywhere. They're put there. You don't find yourself in Cambridge. You were put into Cambridge. Esther didn't find herself in the palace. She was put into the palace, as we'll soon see. The Rebbe says to him, how many Jews are there in Cambridge? In other words, what are you doing about the Jewish life in Cambridge? And then the Rebbe, he says, he gave a big keynote address at the Shluchim convention. He said, and the Rebbe told him, you should not choose academia. You should become a rabbi, a rabbi's rabbi. And that's what he became. And he talks about that. That's the Rebbe gave him his trajectory, his what he should be. And he became this famous rabbi, brilliant. You listen to his talks, amazing. You want to say something? Sorry.
I'll be very
it's supposed to be discussion. I hate being the only one talking. Go ahead.
Is it okay? I'm asking the other person.
Yes.
I converted to Judaism many years ago before I met my husband for anything. And they assign you when you're converting, you're assigned a synagogue, a shul.
Yeah.
And I am converting on my own, and I go to the shul. It's a few blocks from my house. I'm probably 6 months into learning. Who's there speaking the first time? Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sacks of blessed memory.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Going to a shul, and he came, I think, for 5 consecutive months. He came. It was Fifth Avenue on the Upper East Side, and that was you can see how I became religious, right?
Beautiful. Wasn't he great? I mean, even now, some of the stuff I'll share is from him.
Amazing. Anyway.
That's impressive.
Beautiful.
That's special.
And he was knighted by the Queen. She had very high regard for him.
Or Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, of course.
Yeah, Alav Shalom. What a brilliant genius and orator. Oh, I'm so smart. So the Rebbe knew how to direct him. So, which is so beautiful. So You know the joke, the queen. All right, whatever. Another time. So how did we get? Oh, so Jonathan Sachs, the Rebbe says you don't find yourself in a place, you're put into that place. So our connection to our Jewish leaders are more than just he's nice, he's good, he gives good advice. You know, there's a beautiful. So now back to my point. So he said that when you went into the Rebbe, you didn't leave thinking, oh, I'll never be a leader. I'm not empowered. Look how great the Rebbe is. What could I already be? He says, when you left the presence of the Rebbe, which is a true leader, you became a leader. The Rebbe empowered leaders, and that shows what leadership is. Moshe, when you were in Moshe's presence, you became a leader. You have a piece of Moshe because Moshe created a generation of Jews who wanted to be like Moshe. Not follow whatever I say. You're in my cult. Don't question me. A true leader creates leaders. That's how you know what true leadership is. If a leader empowers, then you know you're in the right place. You feel down and out, you feel depressed, you feel you can never aspire to anything, you're in the wrong shul, you're in the wrong school, you're in the wrong college, you're in the wrong, with the wrong leadership. That's not leadership. That's making people followers. The leadership of the Jewish nation was always empowerment. You're also a leader. You're also a Moses. You're also a piece of the Rebbe. You can have it in you to become a leader wherever you are. That's true leadership. So that's Moshe. That's what Moshe gave us. And that's how you know what true leadership is. Which brings me now to the point, the beautiful story with the Rebbe, and then we'll go back to Queen Esther, is that there was a fellow who disappeared every month from his community. And people asked him, where are you going? He would never say. And finally, he came to his rabbi and he says, Rabbi, I have to tell you, I'm in a tremendously terrible quandary. Every month I disappear. The rabbi says, I noticed. He said, I'm having an affair with a non-Jewish woman in another community. So I disappear for a month to be with her. And I know it's wrong, but I have such a desire, I can't stop myself. So the rabbi says, you know what? You have to go to the Lubavitcher Rebbe and seek guidance for this. So he got into the Lubavitcher Rebbe and he tells the Rebbe his whole problem, how he has this tremendous problem. He goes every month and he knows it's wrong. He thought the Rebbe is going to bang him over the head with a frying pan. The Rebbe said to him, you know what's so good about you? You're able to enunciate your situation, what you're doing, and because you're able to enunciate and realize what you're doing, you'll be able to find the right direction to get yourself out of this. And when he heard those words from the Rebbe, not of condemnation, you're a sinner. How could you grow up in a pious home? How could you do this? Go, get 25 lashes, fast for 20 days, and then you'll have retribution. The Rebbe said to him, you're able to see what's wrong. You're able to see you're going down the wrong path. That already will encourage you to take the right path. And when he left the Rebbe, he was so inspired by the Rebbe's lack of judginess or judgment. He dropped it and he became back on track the way he was meant to be. And that, this is an extreme case, but this is what a leader does. This is true leadership. True leadership is not telling the person how horrible they are. Look, there's time to critique. There's time to give musar. Musar means critique. There are times a person needs musar. The Rebbe always knew what to say to whom. Some people do, but I would say from all the hundreds and thousands of stories I know, the Rebbe's approach was always kindness, non-judgmental, giving a person direction. But I did read stories where the Rebbe was tougher with people and gave them a little bit of a, wake-up call, so to speak. But I guess a Rebbe, a Moses, knows how to lead, how to teach, how to show people, knows what a person needs. Some people need a rap on the head. Some people, kindness is the only way. You know what they say? Your first line of defense should be compassion, kindness, and leadership. Later on, if the person needs more discipline and more musar, okay, there's room for that too. But I think always the approach I grew up in my education was compassion, kindness, acceptance. The yeses as opposed to the no's. Not that kids or family doesn't need discipline, but you start off with compassion, and then a person is more receptive to words of rebuke. But if you started for the rebuke, kids, they shut down. That's what they say when you want to give a review to your employee, you start off with a compliment. Then you say, but let's discuss, there's some areas that need improvement. So that's leadership, empowering people, not smashing them on the head. So now going back to the Megillah, so we have all these questions. So while we discuss a little bit of the Megillah, we could also go into the story of the Megillah. So it opens up with a pasuk I want to read from the Megillah, with the famous story, and there's a special way to read it. Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh, hu Achashverosh, hamelech mehoidu ve'at kush. It opens up, these are the days of Achashverosh. Notice it doesn't call him right away King Achashverosh. Why doesn't it call him right away King Achashverosh? Later on it tells us he was the king. So the opening Megillah doesn't even tell us that he's the king. And the reason you'll soon see that in the opening phrases of the Megillah, we see the psychology of Achashverosh. He had imposter syndrome, which we're going to discuss in a minute, and it's very key to the whole story in the Megillah. It's very, very key to the whole story of the Megillah. Now, when you read the Megillah, it's actually one of the most fascinating, exciting stories. There's espionage, there's assassination attempts, there's a beauty pageant, there's partying. Every novel has everything a good novel can have. Everything. Mystery and intrigue, and Esther no one knows she's Jewish. There's so many exciting things. You really could read the entire Megillah as a nice Tom Clancy novel and go, wow, this is such an interesting story. Such an interesting story. You might not even look at this book and say, well, it's a book of the Torah, really? It's such a fascinating story. As a matter of fact, the story of the Megillah is part of the Persian Chronicles. Their history books have the story of the Megillah, actually. Their history books have the story of the Megillah. And that's one of the reasons that God's name is not mentioned, because it had to be written by Esther and Mordechai and the sages in a way that would be appealing to the Persian Empire. If they would give out the book of Esther and it would show Achashverosh as a fool and as a psychologically impaired person, insecure, imposter syndrome, like I just mentioned, he would kill them. You wrote a book showing me in that light. You showed me to be a simple king. You showed me in a bad light. Off with their heads. So they had to write the Megillah in a pleasing way that Achashverosh and his empire would not consider it a threat to the monarchy. And that's why God's name is not mentioned. One of the reasons. Soon we'll see more why God's name is not mentioned. Because the whole story of Megillah, and that's why it's called Megillus Esther, we think it's called Megillus Esther after Esther. The reason it's called Megillus Esther, because what does the word Esther mean? Who knows? Concealment. It's the book of concealment. It's a book that when you read it, you could look at it as a very nice novel. But if you really read it and you really analyze it, you're going to see the hand of God in every part of the story. There's no way this just happened. Coincidence after coincidence. That's why it's called the Book of Esther, because it's the book where the story is concealed in the story. You can read it like a fairy tale. Or if you really want to know the story, you have to study the Book of Esther. And by the way, just a tidbit, whenever it says Melech, it means God, the King of the universe. For example, it says, one famous passage, Nadadosh Nas HaMelech. Remember the part where the king goes to sleep? He can't sleep. He has insomnia. They bring him melatonin. Nothing works. They read him stories. And he says, bring me the book of Chronicles. And he reads the story of how Mordechai saved his life from the poisoning of Bixam the Seresh. They try to poison him. And he rewards Mordechai. You know, he puts him on the horse, right? So it says, finally, there's a decree against the Jews. They're plotting to annihilate and exterminate the entire Jewish nation in 127 countries. Achashverosh was the ruler of the entire world, practically. So the Jews couldn't run away. They couldn't get a visa and escape to Poland, Hungary, Russia, or Israel. There was no way to escape. So God's sleep is disturbed. Now we see the hand of God. So it is the book of concealment. You know the story with Sherlock Holmes and Watson, right? So Sherlock, you know the story? You know it? So Sherlock Holmes and Watson are on a camping trip. And in the middle of the night, Sherlock wakes up Watson. Watson, wake up. He says, what happened? Sherlock says, what do you deduce from this night? And Watson looks up and he says, wow, this universe is massive. Look at the amazing universe. He extols the virtues of the universe, the Big Dipper, the stars, the moon, the Milky Way. This universe is beyond our understanding, he tells Sherlock. And then he says to Sherlock, and what do you deduce from this evening? He says, I deduce our tents have been stolen. Because we could see the sky. So you could look at the story of the Megillah, our tents have been stolen, practically. Or you could look beyond the surface and see what is the real story of the Megillah. What is the real story of the Megillah? So that's the reason it's called Megillah's Esther, and also why the holiday is called Purim. Because God is teaching us, the Megillah gives us a tremendously interesting, not interesting only, pivotal insight into how the world was created, how the world runs. The world runs by nature. You walk out your front door every morning, we take it for granted the sun is always there. And at night, there's always stars and a moon if it's not cloudy, right? Nature runs the world. And we could go through our lives saying there's no God. God sits up on a throne somewhere. The world is run by nature. It's a world of nature. We were created into this world. When you cut yourself, you bleed. And you're alive because your heart beats. And we can really define our lives by the natural occurrences of the universe. Purim, the name Purim. The holiday is Purim. The holiday is, the holiday represents lots. Yeah, we could live our lives thinking we are living in America, we're living in Persia, we're living wherever we're living. We live in the world of nature. We live in the world of nature. And that's what God intended us to live in the world of nature. But then there's another element to realize that living in the world of natural occurrences is connected to living with a spiritual connection. It's not two separate worlds. It seems we like to say there's the spiritual and there's the physical. But really what God is telling us, there's really no difference. It's one entity. It's one unified force. And that's how we have to really live our lives. And the story of Purim taught the Jewish nation that lesson in a very important way. What was the problem? Why did God allow Haman to make a decree? Because we know everything happens from God. Because what did the nation feel at that point? When the story opens up, there's a party of 180 days. 180-day party, you know what that means? And what happens at this party? The Jews are all invited. And he even had kosher food. So you can't say people like to say we ate the non-kosher food. No, there was a kosher menu. And then the Talmud says, the Jewish people enjoyed the feast. That was the problem. That one word defines how the whole story unfolds. The Jewish nation at that time says, listen, we're on top of the world. Achashverosh doesn't know it, but his wife is Jewish. She's from us. Nothing can happen to us. 2, look, we were invited to the White House. We're in the White House. We're part of the elite. Mordechai, the chief rabbi, is advisor to the king. We're riding high. Nothing can happen to us. We're now accepted into society. We're one and the same as everyone else. We're accepted as citizens of Persia. Nothing can happen to us. We're good. We're perfect. V'nehanu, they enjoyed the status of being accepted by Achashverosh and his citizens. That was where the problem occurred. They thought, now we have it, we're on top of the world. Failing to realize that not that a person shouldn't be part of the government, help the government, work for diplomacy. We see that that's what happens in the story. Esther does go to Achashverosh and invite him to a feast and work with diplomacy. But what happens on the other side of the coin? There's fasting, there's prayer. They're not relying on the diplomacy. It's part of the natural way of things. You'd be silly not to rely on diplomacy to get our hostages out. But at the end of the day, it is the prayer and the fasting and the hand of God that's going to save us from the terrorists. Once you think that diplomacy is the way only, and that we're really living in the natural world, has nothing to do with the spiritual world, it's two separate worlds, that's where the problem begins to occur. The minute a Jew looks at the world as I'm living in nature, and that defines my future, then everything comes tumbling down, because that's not how God meant us. God put us in the world to reveal the godliness, the light, the spirituality, not to deny it and say one has nothing to do with the other. So that's what unfolds here. That's why there's now, God shows them what really matters. That Haman doesn't like you. You're not invited because you're accepted. You're not one of them. You're never one of them. The minute you forget that you're not one of them, that's when things, again, the dominoes fall down.
Like in Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
Jews thought they were part of the management,
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, Sarah, what do you, go ahead. Let's get a little feedback.
It just reminds me exactly what she said, but also to now, the Shin wrote this review of how comfortable prior to October 7th Netanyahu was with Qatar and his dealings with them. And essentially, they don't name him by name, but it's in Hebrew, but they're saying he got so comfortable. It's in Hebrew, being one of them in negotiations with Qatar. And they're saying that he got comfortable taking money from them and giving it. They said they almost say he forgot he was a Jew. He said he forgot where he was. They use that. It's amazing. So it's very, if you want to read it, it's
I do. It's very, very telling.
Israeli news,
very telling. It's so hard not to be so judgy. But I was when my father passed away, we started the Gershon Jacobson Memorial Lectures, and the first one was Eli Wiesel, who was a very, very best friend of my father. So he spoke, and he said something so beautiful, which I take with me. He says, you're not allowed to speak Lashon Hara. You're not allowed to speak bad about people, but also about our country, Israel. He says, I never say, especially in public, we should never criticize. This is between us. And this is not, Sarah, your comment was very important. What I was saying is that we have to be very careful how we speak about Eretz Yisrael in public, because the nations will say, oh, look how the Jews protesting against, when Bibi Netanyahu came to New York and Jews protested against him, this was a chilul Hashem, because what did the non-Jews say? Look at that. The own Jews don't agree with him. Yeah. It's a kind of aligning with what you're saying, but yeah. So that. But the minute we think we're one of them, it doesn't happen. Even with the kibbutznik, I heard one of the kibbutznik said, I drove their child to the hospital every week. I drove into Gaza, took their child to Israeli hospital, brought him back. And then when he was taken in as a hostage, that family beat him. So this is what's going on. Not that you shouldn't do kindness for others, but no, when you cannot allow an enemy into your backyard.
But the Talmud says, will always be hated amongst the nations. It's not to be taken lightly.
Yeah.
It's like as soon as you're liked, it's because you're doing something wrong.
Don't don't kowtow to your enemies to the detriment of your fellow Jews being murdered in cold blood. There's chesed, there's kindness. What should you let someone die? God forbid. God values in the Torah, we value human life more than anyone, but to our own detriment. To reiterate what the Rebbe says, quoting the halacha, Jewish law, that if an enemy comes into your shed and steals your wheat, just your wheat, on Shabbos, the Jewish army must go and attack. Why? They just took your wheat. The Rebbe says, because what does the law say? They're going to come next for you. It doesn't, this is the halacha. It's not made up. It's from the Torah. There are laws to protect human Jewish life and human life. If they just come for you, I want to reiterate because it's so powerful, even if they just come to steal your hay from your shed, and you say, no, it's only the hay, nish geferlach. Nothing happened. No, a Jew is obligated to take his gun on Shabbos and go attack first because they took your hay, because the Torah says next they're going to come for you and your family, which is what happened. So it's not more dogmatic not to make peace. We want peace, but not to our own detriment where our lives are at stake, you know? So, it comes up in every conversation because that's what we're living through now, the hypocrisy and the hate that's going on the campuses. Story of Purim, but in a different way. So going back to the story now, so the story opens up with Achashverosh. It's not called him king. Why? To reiterate what we said before is, I love psychology and I like more of the mystical, Kabbalistic insights, because the Megillah is already telling us how the story unfolds, that Achashverosh has imposter syndrome. And that's why, if you look at the opening words, most people wouldn't even notice it. But it's how the story is told, is we see how this unfolds with Vashti. Why does he kill his queen? He really doesn't want to kill her. And it doesn't even say he killed her, which is interesting. Everywhere else in the Megillah, it's open about killing. They kill the ones who were plotted to kill the king. They hang Haman, they hang his sons. The Megillah is not being glossing over the word kill. But it's telling us that Achashverosh didn't want her killed. Why? And I'll explain as I tell these in this next point. So now it tells us what happens. He has a feast. He gets nicely drunk, and he sends Hasarisim to go bring Vashti, his gorgeous Vashti. By the way, Vashti means beautiful. He named her Vashti. She wasn't called Vashti. That's not her real name. He called her my beauty, and that's Vashti. Now, who are the Sarisim? The Enochs. Did I pronounce that right? They were...
Right.
Well,
Eunuchs,
that's what I meant. The eunuchs.
Eunuchs.
They were anyone who worked in the harems or with the women was castrated, and they're called the Sirisim because they didn't want them to try anything. It was a very depraved culture, obviously. It's like by the Greeks and the Romans. So on the seventh day, which is the feast was 180 days, and then an additional week, he goes to call his wife Vashti, come undressed. I want to show everyone your beauty. So this is what he says. Gam Vashti Hamalka, also Vashti the queen, made a feast. Okay? Then a little further down it says, he sends his Sirisim to bring as Vashti Hamalka. So you see, she's still being calling Vashti the queen. Okay? Now, what happens with Vashti? Rashi says she had leprosy. God punished her. Why did God punish her? Because she would take Jewish children and women to be her servants, her slaves. And on Shabbos, she knew it was Shabbos. She undressed them from their Shabbos and made them work on Shabbos. She forced them to work on Shabbos just to prove her point. She was known to be a cruel, vicious queen. Okay, think of Game of Thrones. So God said, she undressed my Jewish nation. I'm going to make sure she has leprosy. So she has leprosy. She can't come out. She's horrible. Her whole body's covered in these lesions. But Tima'ain, now look how the Megillah changes the word. Hamalka Vashti, the queen Vashti. The queen Vashti refuses to come. Okay? So in the beginning, she's called Vashti Hamalka. And then when she refuses to come, she says Hamalka Vashti. So there is a psychological warfare going on between Achashverosh and his wife. It wasn't a great marriage, if you want to put it slightly. Okay? It wasn't a great marriage. He calls her Vashti Hamalka. Vashti, I named you Vashti. Hamalka, you're the queen. You know why you're the queen? Because I'm the king. I married you, so now you're the queen. No. When he calls her, she says, I'm not the queen because of you. You're the king because of me. I'm fourth generation from Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king. She was royal blood. She met Achashverosh in the stables. She fell in love with him, like Downton Abbey. Remember, she falls in love with the driver, and she marries the driver. Same thing happened. She fell in love with him. It was attractive to her. So she says, I was the queen before you were the king. Don't give me that business that I'm the queen because you're the king. I'm the royal blood. You're a nobody. And this is what she says to him, Rashi describes. She says to him like this. Let me just get the Rashi. She says to him, remember. Oh, so what happens when she refuses to come? It says, his anger burned from inside. So Rashi says, what does it mean? Inside his anger burned. What happened? Why does anger burn in him so greatly? Because she did not wish to come, right? He's angry because she embarrassed him. He said, my beautiful, gorgeous queen is going to come undressed. I want everyone to see her beauty. And she says, no, I'm not coming. But when she said she wasn't coming, Rava in the Talmud says, Vashti said to him a message. You are the son of my father's stableman, Achareu, which means Achashverosh, his name. And remember also, you're stone drunk. Belshazzar, my father, the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, the king, drank wine with 1,000 men, and he never became inebriated. And you drink a cup of wine and you're drunk as can be. You're crazy from drink, she says. So she didn't only say, I'm not coming. She alluded to the fact that he's the stableman. He's a nobody. And that you're not royal blood. Royal blood is like my father, Belshazzar. When he drank, he didn't show he was drunk. He kept his dignity. You drink a cup of wine. Look, you want me to come in the nude to come and show me off because you're a drunk nobody. So she insults him. And this feeds more and more into what I said, imposter syndrome. He knows deep down he only became king because he married a girl from royal blood. He would never have been king. A stableman's son, a nobody. So when she feeds into his insecurity and she hits him where it counts, now that unleashes the whole story of what happens, how Haman now becomes into power. Think of Stalin and Beria. Remember the story? Stalin, how many people did he murder? Millions and millions and millions. And Beria, his right-hand man, fed into his paranoia. Stalin woke up every day and he even, they say, killed his own wife in his bed because Beria planted him that his wife was going to kill him. Beria did what Haman does to Achashverosh, and we'll soon see. He made him even more paranoia. Everyone's out to get you. He told Stalin, I'm the only one you could trust. Ended up, Beria was killed by the next regime, but Beria even planned to assassinate Stalin, saved him from the assassination so that he could later say, you see, I'm the only one that you could trust. But he planned the assassination. So there was a lot of psychological craziness with Stalin. And Beria was even more vicious, they say, than Stalin. So now it says Mumuchan. Now the Achashverosh is humiliated, right? So he has like a little court case with his advisors. So Haman says, so Achashverosh tries to get Vashti out of being hung, killed, whatever. He says, listen, he says, I sent people. I didn't go myself. Maybe she felt insulted that I didn't go myself. So Haman, this is how he rises to power. He says to Achashverosh during the little assembly, you can't let this go. She didn't only insult you, she insulted every husband. Every wife is going to do what she does. No woman is going to listen to their husband now because they said the queen didn't listen to the king. Why do we need to listen to you? That's what he does. So Achashverosh is now no way out. They're not making it only about the king now, they're making it about everybody. So he's forced to kill Vashti. He really doesn't want to kill Vashti. You know why? Who could say why psychologically he doesn't want to kill Vashti? Because he knows, go ahead. He knows deep down.
But she's telling the truth.
But also he's afraid that if she gets taken, they'll say to him, you're no king. You're not royal blood. Out. We're going to behead you. We need a real king. So in his mind, if he takes out Vashti, they're going to take him out. So he tries to hem and haw a little bit and protect her. But it doesn't work. It doesn't work because Haman is in the council and Haman wants to rise to power. Haman is the Breria, whatever his name is. Got his name now. And he tries to poison the situation. He succeeds. They now get rid of her. And that's why the whole thing unfolds with Esther being able to be chosen as queen. Of course, this is the hand of God. But we see how it unfolds only because Achashverosh has this deep, deep-seated insecurity and imposter syndrome that he doesn't deserve to be king. Otherwise, Haman couldn't play into that paranoia. And Esther saves her people through that same manipulation, as we'll soon see. Okay, so this is a lot to take in. So does everybody understand what unfolds here, how the story starts? And that's why when he calls her, to reiterate, he calls her Vashti. You're Vashti. You happen to be the queen because of me. But she says, no, I'm the queen. I'm Hamalka Vashti. I have royal blood. You're the one without the royal blood. Okay, so now he kills Vashti. And let's see what other important things I want to mention. We only have 5 more minutes. So let's just quickly then discuss Esther's role very quickly. So we fast forward, there's a horrible decree against the Jewish nation. Mordechai comes and tells Esther, did you hear about the decree? And she says to Mordechai, how could I go into the king? Vashti didn't come to the king, and look what happened to her. I'll go into the king, it'll bring back the memory of Vashti. Oh, she's coming without my permission? Remember, he had a rule, you can't come into his chamber. Achashverosh had made a rule, just to reiterate, for those who don't remember, that if you're not summoned, you can't come to his inner chambers. Why? He prevents assassination attempts. Who knows who's going to come in with a knife, a gun, right? So he's protecting himself. So she says to Mordechai, if I go into the king, I haven't been summoned already in 3 weeks. If I go in without permission, he'll kill me. He'll kill me unless he sticks out a scepter. So Mordechai says the very pivotal words that are change the whole way we look at things. Mordechai says to Esther, the Jewish people will be saved. But the question is, will it be through you or through somebody else? We'll be saved. But the question is, you now have the opportunity to be the one through whom your nation is saved. Are you going to carpe diem, seize the moment? That's one of my favorite lines. So she says, okay, I'm going to go into the king, but you have to call fast for 3 days and 3 nights and bring the Jewish nation together, and I'll go into the king. I'll go into the king. And then she says the famous words, avadati, avadati. I'm going to go into the king, but lost, I will be lost. And the question is, why does she repeat it twice? So you could say for emphasis, you know, when you say, oh, I'm such in pain, I'm such in pain, or I'm lost, and I didn't know what to do. But there's a deeper understanding. Remember, she was married to Mordechai. She was taken by force to the non-Jewish king. So they say there's two versions. One, when he tried to be intimate with her, an angel came in her stead. So she was never violated. And the second opinion is she was forced. It was like a rape every time. So it wasn't considered that she went willingly. But what happens now? She gets dressed up and she knocks on the king's chamber and she says, honey, I want to speak to you. What is he going to think? She's there for cocktails. He's going to say, finally, she's coming to me for a little, relations. She never went to him before. Now, Baruch Hashem, I broke through. I finally got her to come to me. So what is he going to, so she's now going willingly. So she says to Mordechai, once I go to the king willingly, I can never come back to you as a wife. It's over. And not only that, avadati, I can't come to you back physically as a wife anymore. And avadati, my spiritual share in the world to come will also be lost because now I'm transgressing. I'm going to the king and being intimate with him. So these two words describe the self-sacrifice. Everyone thinks the self-sacrifice was she shows up and he could behead her for showing up unannounced. The self-sacrifice was that she now ultimately gave up everything. She never could go back to Mordechai. She never could go back to her husband, even if the king dies tomorrow, because she went to him willingly. And if you read the story, what happens at the end, of course, the Jews are saved. But what happens to Esther? Ever wonder what happened to her? It's so sad. She stays in the palace. She doesn't go home. She doesn't get to celebrate with the family. She doesn't go back to Mordechai and go, hi, honey, I'm back home now. She and her entire life, she dies in and is buried there with Mordechai, in Iraq, right? There's the grave of Esther and Mordechai. She stays there. It's very, very sad. When everyone is rejoicing, she's in the palace. He didn't give her up just because her people were saved, or she said, I'm Jewish. He didn't care. So that's the heroism of Esther, that she gave up her entire physical life for the Jewish people. She never went back home. And she became pregnant with Achashverosh. She gave birth to Darius IV, who attempted to rebuild the second temple, the second Beis HaMikdash. So I want to conclude. There's so much more to the story. And next week is a fast day, so we're not going to have a class. I want to share a few quick lessons about Queen Esther that I wrote. So in conclusion, what do we get out of this class, I think, is first of all, believe in your hidden power. Believe in your connection to God, that you could do and be like Queen Esther. The second lesson I wrote is embrace your destiny. God places us where we need to be in order to fulfill our mission. So as Rabbi Sachs says, the Rebbe said, you're not found anywhere, you're put somewhere. You're where you are because God meant you to be in Puerto Rico, in Norwalk, in Weston. We're stronger together. What brought about the fact that the Jews were able to defend themselves was they were united in prayer. They united to fast and to pray. When in trouble, turn to God. Never lose hope. Be a leader in action. And the last thing I wrote is sometimes a person has to make a sacrifice. Esther says, if I perish, I perish. Avadati, avadati. Sometimes, and hopefully, we are not asked to make such ultimate sacrifices. We're asked sometimes to make a small sacrifice. Think of Esther, what she gave up to save her people. You got to just think of her royalty, who she was. I want to share one more little tidbit. Remember, she invites Haman to party 1 and then party 2, 2 parties. The Jewish people didn't know that she was planning a whole plan of how to usurp Haman. She had to feed into Achashverosh's paranoia, which I'll share in one more second. When they heard on the front page of the Persian Times that their Jewish queen, their daughter of Israel, invited Hitler, Hamas, Haman to the dinner with her king, with her husband, they said she's a traitor. Look what happened. She got accepted in the palace. Now she's one of them. They didn't know that the feast that she announced was to save her people. They thought she's a traitor. She's solidifying her position because there's an edict against her people. So they went around cursing her. Whoa, look how she betrayed us. She's invited Hitler to the table to have a feast with Achashverosh. That's how they looked at her. So she was betrayed from every side. And yet did she care? I mean, she cared, but she went and she made those feasts and she created a scenario in Achashverosh's mind, because why two feasts? Feast one was to start the paranoia. Feast two was to get rid of Haman. She says to Achashverosh, he says, honey, what do you want? When she comes in the chamber, he says, I want to invite to a feast for you and Haman. You. In other words, I'm making a feast for you and Haman. And he's, wow, my wife is making a feast for me. Then at the feast that night, he again says, darling, what do you want? Half the kingdom I will give you. And she says, my request is tomorrow night, can you come again to a feast for us, for us, Haman and you? Lanu, she puts Achashverosh and Haman together. And that's why he couldn't sleep. Because he says, what's going on here? Why is she inviting us, which means us in third person, Haman and Achashverosh? Is something going on with them? Is she having an affair with Haman? Is Haman looking to take my queen and cut me out and kill me? She planted a scenario where Achashverosh is paranoia now. He thinks Haman is out to get his wife and replace him. Because look why is she inviting him to a party with me? I'm not good enough? Why is she inviting Haman? And then what does she say to him at the second party to feed into the paranoia? She says to him, there's a man who wants to kill me and my people. You know, I'm Jewish. Who's the man? She says, Haman. So what does he think in his head? First, he thought Haman is having an affair with her. He wants to get him out of the picture. Now he's saying, oh, now Haman wants to get rid of my wife because she's my ally, and then he's going to get rid of me. So he leaves the room all upset, and Haman jumps on the couch where Esther is lying to beg forgiveness. He walks back in the room. He sees Haman on top of Esther, begging for forgiveness. On top. So he says, oh, so my theory was correct. He is in love with my wife and wants to take her for himself. And that's when he says, hang him. So she she builds a paranoia in him slowly. She's brilliant. She could have just invited him, say, guess what? I'm Jewish. Save my people. And he'll say, what? She had to plant that, show Haman as the enemy, that he's trying to usurp you, get rid of me, usurp you. And then the clincher comes, he hangs Haman. It wouldn't have worked if she would just make a party. She said, come to the party for you, your majesty. And then she says, come to the party for you and Haman, your majesty. And then at the party, she also manipulates it. She says, yeah, he wants to kill me and my people, she says. So everybody understand how she builds this whole case. And even though the Jewish nation looks at her as the traitor, she's a traitor. So her self-sacrifice was so deep on so many levels. That's why it's called Megillas Esther. If you take another idea, besides that it's the book of concealment. Because Esther really gives up everything. Everything. Sometimes you give up, but the people of your nation cheer you on. Queen Esther, Queen Esther. They looked at her as a traitor, her own people. And then in the palace, she was in terrible danger. So from all sides. And she gives up everything for her people. That's who Queen Esther is. That's, if you know the true story of who she is, her self-sacrifice, the quintessential queen is Queen Esther. So if we can only aspire to be a little bit like Queen Esther, we'll be okay. So I want to wish everybody an easy fast Thursday. If you want to join us Thursday night at 7:30 is Megillah, and a break fast, a beautiful feast with music. And then Friday, we're doing a children family party, 5 o'clock till candle lighting, followed by Shabbos dinner. So join us. And Sarah, on Tuesdays, a Hamantash bake for parents, grandparents, 4:45 at the Hebrew school. And if you want to invite any families, please do. And remember the 3 mitzvahs of Purim quickly: giving shalach manos to one Jewish person with 2 food types, hearing the Megillah twice, Thursday night and Friday having a feast during the day, and giving tzedakah to 2 charities, institutions, and so on. So I want to wish everybody a good week, a good Shabbos, and a wonderful, joyous, uplifting Purim that we should hear. Our current miracle should happen.